Hi, this is Marc Elias, founder of Democracy Docket. It is Sunday, August 10th, and this is my weekly update. And boy, is it a jam-packed one. We are in the middle of what I am calling the great unraveling. We are watching our institutions unravel. We are watching our democracy unravel. We are watching our rule of law unravel. And right now, we are watching the beginnings of the 2016 elections begin to unravel. And nowhere is that more evident than in the state of Texas, where Republicans continue to attack their already gerrymandered maps that they enacted in 2021 to deprive minority voters, deprive Democrats of an equal say in their government. But yet that isn't enough. Donald Trump called the governor, said, hey, I need you to squeeze another 5 seats out of this already horrifically gerrymandered map. And the Republicans in Texas not only said, yes, sir, but with tears in their eyes, they are now taking hammer and tong to the democracy that we have all come to cherish in their effort to effectuate this for Donald Trump. So let's talk about where we are and where we're going. As you know, over the last 7 days, we have seen a dramatic escalation of the Republican attacks in Texas. We saw after the Democratic members of that state legislature left the state in order to break the quorum. In Texas, you need 100 members of the state legislature to be present on the floor in order to pass legislation. So when Governor Abbott called a special session for the purpose of enacting a new gerrymandered map or a more gerrymandered map, the Texas Democrats left the state in sufficient numbers to deprive Texas Republicans of the ability to conduct business in the state legislature. What happened then is a series of domino fell, and here they are. Number one, the Republican Speaker of the State House issued a civil arrest warrant for those state legislators. Now, let's be clear, that's not a criminal arrest warrant. These legislators have done nothing criminally wrong. They have not violated the law. They have exercised their prerogatives under the rules as they exist in the Texas state constitution. Nevertheless, as part of this theater, the state legislative leader, the Speaker of the House, issued this civil arrest warrant, whatever the hell that is. Okay, that then triggered the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, filing a lawsuit to try to essentially strip these Democrats of their seats, essentially declare them vacant, and therefore these Democrats who left the state would no longer be in the legislature. There'd be vacancies, and they would be filled in upcoming days and weeks pursuant to Texas law. That is a nuclear option against these Democrats. The Attorney General, Ken Paxton, interestingly, he said that the governor was wrong. The governor didn't have the power to do this and actually opposed that effort, but has been in the middle of a tirade of his own to try to declare these seats vacant and, probably most importantly, suing in Illinois and in California to have these individual state legislators arrested, saying essentially that the Illinois state police, the California state authorities need to somehow effectuate this civil arrest warrant and have them arrested and returned to Texas. This, everyone needs to understand, is a stunt.
Respectfully, he's making up some shit.
This is not going to work. The Illinois state courts are not going to order this. Maybe they'll get a local court in a very red area, which is where they've gone, to issue a preliminary decision in their favor. But as this goes up the Illinois courts, that will be reversed. This stunt by Paxton will not succeed in Illinois. It will not succeed in California. But that is part of this escalating weaponization of government, the misuse of government power by Republicans to try to threaten, cajole, intimidate, you pick the word, these legislators to return to the state of Texas so that Republicans can effectuate their power grab there. That is what is going on. If you read Democracy Docket, if you are subscribed to Democracy Docket, you know that. Unfortunately, if you subscribe to outlets like the Washington Post and most of legacy media, you're getting a fraction of the story of what is going on. So please do me a favor right now. Please become a subscriber to Democracy Docket. If you want even more context and analysis, you can become a premium member for $10 a month, but either free or paid. more important than now than ever before to stay informed. And the best way to do that is to subscribe to Democracy Docket. The link is above and in the description below. Okay, that's not all, though, that's going on in Texas. We also have a lawsuit by Ken Paxton against Beto O'Rourke's PAC. Now, why, you might ask, is he suing Beto O'Rourke's PAC? Because Beto O'Rourke's PAC was raising money for this effort. And one of the ways that Texas Republicans are trying to leverage to bring this to an end is to pressure the finances of these members. There are fines that are already in place, $500 a day for each of these legislators while they're out of town. By the way, these folks only make a few $100s a month. It's a part-time legislature. So the Democrats who have left the state are doing this because they are patriots, because they are fighting for democracy. They are heroes, not just in the state of Texas, but for all of us. But Ken Paxton going after Beto's PAC because it is one of the vehicles that Beto O'Rourke was using to try to raise money for this. Democracy Docket tracking that. What else is going on? John Cornin, the senator from Texas. And now this is a little bit of intrastate politics, right? Because John Cornin is up for re-election in 2026. He is facing a stiff primary from Ken Paxton and will be facing a stiff general election from whomever Democrats wind up nominating there. So Cornin trying to inject himself into this discussion by calling on Kash Patel, the director of the FBI. That's right. John Cornin, United States Senator, goes to Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, a close confidant of Donald Trump's, and says, hey, send the FBI after these legislators who are in Illinois. Why? Who the hell knows? They've done nothing wrong. There is certainly nothing the FBI should be doing about this. The FBI is there to investigate and prosecute federal crimes. There's not even an allegation that these folks have violated federal law. They haven't violated state law. And the idea that John Cornyn is willing to jump into the MAGA swamp with both feet and say, I am one of you, and I'm going to ask you to misuse law enforcement at the federal level, not going after gangs, not going after fentanyl, not going after white collar crime, not going after any of the other federal priorities that law enforcement should be focused on. Instead, I want to weaponize and politicize the FBI so that I can look like I'm an effective MAGA supporter in Texas. Absolutely disgraceful. Absolutely disgusting. If the legacy media was paying attention to what's really going on and giving you the information that you need, they'd be calling out John Cornyn. But I bet you most of who's watching this video, unless you subscribe to Democracy Docket, you didn't even know what John Cornyn's role in all of this is. All right. What starts in Texas, unfortunately, is not staying in Texas. We are watching as Republican governors and state legislators are lining up in other states to also do Donald Trump's bidding. Where am I focused? Number one, I am most focused on the state of Florida because that is a state with a Republican trifecta. It is also a state with a governor who is willing to do anything, Ron DeSantis, to suck up to Donald Trump, to put his thumb, his full arm, his whole body on the scale of justice against the rule of law. And it's a state where this week the Florida House Speaker announced on Thursday the formation of a select committee on congressional redistricting to re-examine that state's current map, which, by the way, has 20 Republicans and 8 Democratic seats. It is already an extreme gerrymander. It is already a blatant violation of that state's constitution. Why do I say that? Because Florida voters voted into that state's constitution an anti-partisan gerrymandering provision. That's right. In the Florida state constitution is a provision that prohibits the Florida legislature, prohibits the Florida governor from engaging in gerrymandering to advantage or disadvantage a party or a candidate. And yet here we are. They are doing it in plain daylight. They figure that state Supreme Court either will stand up and stand by the Republican Party because that's the composition of that state Supreme Court. So they're counting on the state Supreme Court not enforcing this state constitutional provision, or that it will simply be too late. It'll be too late for 2026. So either way, watch Florida. It's my number one state after the state of Texas to watch for Republicans to subvert the rule of law around redistricting. What are the other states? Missouri. The Missouri Republicans have also suggested they may target at least one more Democratic seat in the Kansas City region. That also would be an abuse of power, and we are watching Missouri closely. Okay, so what's up with J.D. Vance going to Indiana? I mean, the guy's the vice president of the United States. As far as I can tell, he only does three things. Number one, he goes on vacation. I mean, he's going on vacation a lot. I mean, he was just on vacation again. He just got back from another vacation. All right. So JD Vance, he goes on vacation a lot. What else does he do? He seems to be like the point person for covering up for Donald Trump on the Epstein files. I mean, that's like, I mean, if not all of this other stuff was going on about redistricting, I'd have a lot to say about the Epstein files. All I'll say is, hey, Donald Trump, scaredy cat, release the Epstein files. Hey, JD Vance, why don't you tell your boss to release the Epstein file? Hey, Don Bongino, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, you all promised we'd have release of the Epstein files. Where are they? Okay, that's all I got to say about the Epstein files. But the reason why I mentioned J.D. Vance is because he was dispatched to Indiana to try to convince Republicans there to engage in gerrymandering. Now, the early reports are that the Indiana Republicans want no part of this. We'll wait, we'll see. We'll see how long that holds. But at least for now, Indiana Republicans seem to be saying no. J.D. Vance is trying to pressure them to say yes. Where else? New Hampshire Republicans so far are saying no, but also still early, so we're watching that. Ohio. Ohio has to redistrict anyway. Why? Because Ohio Republicans keep enacting maps that violate their state constitution's ban on partisan gerrymandering. They were struck down, struck down, struck down, and struck down. I think 4 times last cycle, but ultimately the clock ran out, and they were able to use their illegal, unconstitutional maps. Well, they have to redraw maps, and I, as sure as I sit here, am certain that Republicans in Ohio will further gerrymander those maps to suck up to Donald Trump and to do his bidding. Okay, so that's kind of the Republican lineup. What's going on the Democratic side? Okay, so California, we know Gavin Newsom has already said he is looking at either a ballot initiative of one kind or another to enact a new map in time for 2026 that would target as many as 5 Republican seats. I don't have all the details there. I just know what Democracy Docket has reported. Again, Democracy Docket has been all over this story. So we know California is saying, hey, if Texas does 5 seats, we will potentially do 5 seats as well. That will require a very expensive ballot initiative. Expect Republicans to try to oppose it. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Republican governor, has already come out, former Republican governor has already come out and said he thinks it's the wrong thing to do. Here's my message. If you're a Democrat living in California, I understand you like your commission, your nonpartisan commission, but we cannot unilaterally disarm. We cannot be in a situation in which Republicans go state after state after state and gerrymander while Democrats stand by their good government commissions. So get your good government heads out of your asses and support Governor Newsom in what he is doing. In this instance, it is an all hands on deck emergency for democracy, and California is going to play a big role. Where else? Governors in New York, Kathy Hochul, and in Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, have both said every option's on the table. They are looking at what they may need to do, particularly if the Texas plague spreads to those other states. So watch California and New York, where I have a lot of respect for what those governors are already saying they will do, and also for their past track record in this arena. Okay, but that leaves some other Democratic states, and I'm just going to rattle off here and say what's going on. All right, Colorado, Oregon, New Jersey, what are you guys up to? Those are also states controlled by Democrats with very different processes. Some have nonpartisan processes, some don't. But I think it's time that Democrats in all of those states start looking at what their options are and start talking about that as well. And then finally, the state I live in, Virginia, there's a gubernatorial election this November. And I certainly hope that Congressman Spanberger, who is the front runner in that race, she's the Democratic nominee, I think almost certain to win, will be a great governor for the Commonwealth. She's going to bring in probably a larger majority of Democrats in both state houses. So I certainly hope Virginia puts it early on their legislative agenda as well to figure out what to do to counteract the avalanche of anti-democracy, anti-voter gerrymandering that we are seeing coming out of these Republican states, disregarding their population, disregarding and ignoring and violating the rights of minority voters, something, by the way, Democratic states do not do. They are doing it for one reason. They're doing it to suck up to Donald Trump. And that's the only reason they're doing this. They are doing it because they are sycophants for Donald Trump. So never forget that. All right. That's only what's going on in redistricting. I mean, there's a lot more going on, particularly around voting and the 2026 election. And again, the best place to stay informed about this is Democracy Docket. It is the leading source for news, information, and analysis for everything you need to know about voting, democracy, and elections. So please become a subscriber now. The links are in the description below. And I wrote something this Saturday for Democracy Docket that I hope those of you who are already subscribers read. And it's about the Voting Rights Act turning 60. That's right. The Voting Rights Act turned 60 years old this week. And I wrote a piece that was kind of on the long side about why we are in the position we're in and what it means that the Supreme Court of the United States will be considering a very important Voting Rights Act case this term. So last term, they considered a case out of Louisiana where a bunch of white voters are challenging a map that the legislature in Louisiana drew as a result of a court order to create 2 black opportunity districts. They drew that map, court ordered them to, they followed the law, and then a group of non-black voters, non-minority voters sued to strike it down. And that case went to the Supreme Court of the United States. There was oral argument and we expected a decision. But instead of a decision, on the last day of the term, the Supreme Court said, we want this re-argued on a broader set of questions. And what are those questions? Well, essentially what they want to know is whether the Voting Rights Act Section 2, the remaining key provision of the Voting Rights Act that is in place after Shelby County gutted Section 5, whether essentially that can continue to have vitality, whether it should be overruled or whether it should just be neutered, but short of overruled, or whether they should reject this challenge and we should continue to be able to rely on Section 2. So reflecting on that, I wrote this piece, and I hope if you have not already read it, but you have it, you go back and read it. And I want to just read you one sentence from it because it kind of encapsulates a lot of my thinking about where we are and how we got here. Somewhere, I wrote, between Donald Trump demanding to see President Barack Obama's birth certificate and taking the oath of office, the Supreme Court felt empowered to suggest racism was over in Shelby County in 2013. And that's really how I do think about this, is that, we had the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965. It was the crown jewel of American democracy. Ronald Reagan saw to its expansion and reauthorization. George Bush in 2006, again, presided over a Republican Congress that reauthorized it. And, it passed the Senate that year, famously 98-0. And so I've asked myself, how did we go from that Republican Party? How did we go from a Supreme Court that routinely upheld it to where we are today, where in 2013, the Supreme Court strikes down the first provision. Now in 2025, we are facing the possibility they will strike down the last big major protection in it. And the party of Reagan and Bush, which were very conservative, were not particularly friendly to voting rights, by the way, has now been replaced by the party of Donald Trump. And so that's why I look at it at how the Republican Party went from that party to the party that demands Barack Obama's birth certificate and then elects Donald Trump. And I don't think you can disconnect that from the temperament and the approach the Supreme Court is taking. Because I think in the world we live in right now, the Republican Party, political Republican Party, the caucuses in the House and the Senate, their voters, and certainly Donald Trump, have created a permission structure, have created an expectation, frankly, that if you are a conservative justice, if you are someone who views themselves as part of the right wing of the legal establishment, you are expected to be anti-voting rights, including anti-Voting Rights Act. And that is actually something very new in this country. It wasn't true under Nixon, wasn't true under Reagan, wasn't true under Bush the first, Bush the second, but it is the settled expectation of the Republican Party today. And so I think there is a interplay between what we see going on in politics and what we see going on in the courts. Now, I'm not losing hope. I'm not giving up. I'm not saying that we're going to lose this case. My law firm is involved in that Louisiana case. So everyone needs to keep fighting and needs to hold the Supreme Court to its word. When it struck down Shelby County, it said, Chief Justice wrote that nothing in that opinion would undermine or cast doubt on the nationwide application of Section 2. Well, now the Supreme Court has to decide whether the nationwide application of Section 2 is still in place. So we need to hold the Supreme Court to its previous decisions. We need to expect that they will follow federal law. We need to expect that they will follow precedent. But we also need to reflect on this moment. Okay, that is my soapbox on the Voting Rights Act. The other big constitutional thing this week was Donald Trump calling for a new census based on the election of 2024, I have no earthly idea what he means. He has no earthly idea what he means. And anyone in the legacy media who is minimizing this and saying, oh, this is just him saying that he doesn't want non-citizens counted in a census, that's a bunch of bullshit. Yes, it is true that in his social media post, he said that people who are in our country illegal will not be counted in the census. That is true. That's in that sentence. But I ask you, why did the legacy media look past the prior sentence? The prior sentence, which is that he wants this census conducted immediately, quote, based on modern facts and figures, and importantly, using the result and information gained from the presidential election of 2024. Isn't that curious? It's not that he wants an accurate count of everybody. It's not even that he wants an accurate count of all citizens. By the way, he doesn't have the constitutional authority to do a mid-cycle census. It's done every 10 years. He cannot exclude non-citizens. That is also in the Constitution. So have no fear. This is not going to happen. But for once, I wish the legacy media would focus on what Donald Trump is actually saying rather than glossing over the uncomfortable parts. And that is what he is saying is that he wants a new census that is based on the information and results gained from the 2024 election, which is his way of saying he only wants results that showed that he won. He wants the people who are counted next time to reflect the popular vote and the electoral college vote in that one election. That would be the greatest disenfranchisement of voters in American history by far. Pay attention. Don't sleep on this. Don't dismiss it as just his musings. This is part of the weaponization of government. All right. So that is not all that happened this week, but I want to turn a little bit to what to expect next week so that your eyes don't glaze over, because there is a lot on the agenda next week, which begins with a bunch of hearings. So on Monday, there'll be a trial over the California National Guard deployment. You may remember this is a lawsuit brought by the governor of California challenging Trump's use of the National Guard in Los Angeles. That trial will begin. That is going to be a must watch. It is something Democracy Docket will be keeping track of. Make sure you follow that. There'll also be a hearing in an Arizona Maricopa election duties dispute case. You know, Maricopa County has been the target of right-wing disinformation ever since the 2020 election. This is where Phoenix is, largest county in Arizona. And there is a hearing in a dispute over what the duties are of election officials in Maricopa County. And this is a very, very important thing to pay attention to. Also, the Supreme Court will finally receive briefs from the Republican National Committee. Their responses are due in a lawsuit that they brought to try to prevent ballots cast by mail that are received a day or two after the election from counting, even if they are postmarked on or before Election Day. They are challenging in this instance a Mississippi law. My law firm and I have intervened to defend the Mississippi law. Not that I don't trust the Mississippi Attorney General to fight the RNC hard, but trust but verify. The RNC's brief in this case is due. So this will have nationwide implications, and it is something that we all need to be paying attention to. On Wednesday in Georgia, the 11th Circuit will hear arguments on two provisions of that massive voter suppression law. Remember that big one in 2021, Georgia SB 202, that banned handing out food and water to people waiting in lines and rejecting absentee ballots if a birthday was written on the outer envelope that doesn't match the voter registration record. Remember this was the massive voter suppression law that caused the All-Star game to move its game out of Georgia. That was when corporate America had some decency and some shame, or at least pretended to. Now they have no decency, no shame, and they certainly don't pretend. Instead, they write checks to Donald Trump. But in any event, lawsuit challenging that, which my law firm was the first to file a lawsuit over. I think we filed our lawsuit 6 minutes after he signed the bill. That's now going to the 11th Circuit, and the 11th Circuit will hear argument on those two provisions, and that will be a definite case to watch as the 11th Circuit argument goes forward, and after that, as we await a decision. And then finally, a Maryland judge will hold a hearing on Trump's lawsuit to stop judges in Maryland from blocking the government from deporting people in violation of due process protections. You remember, I talked about this at the time. This was an outrageous lawsuit the Trump administration filed to try to stop every judge in Maryland from basically pausing the expedited deportation of people so that these folks could have basic due process. I thought at the time it should just be thrown out. I thought it should be dismissed as frivolous. People never listen to me. They treat the government as if it is normal. They continue to give it the presumption of regularity. And as a result, we wind up with hearings like this. In any event, Trump's going to lose this case. I would have been clearer that this was frivolous from the start. They're going to get a hearing, then they will lose. But that is a very important hearing to watch as well. Okay, so normally this is the point where I say make sure you're subscribed to Democracy Docket and also this YouTube channel by pressing the button in front of you. And I want you to do those things. But I'm going to ask one other favor. Put something in the comments. Let me know what you think of these videos. Are they helpful? Do you want more of them? Do you want them more frequently? I do them right now once a week. You get them on Sundays. Do you think that the format needs to change? I do this for you because it is part of my commitment to help keep you informed and also my obligation as a citizen to try to sound the alarm about what Donald Trump is doing to our country and the threat he poses. By day, I practice law. Like I'm a lawyer. Like I'm not like a pretend lawyer. I actually litigate cases. I will be arguing a case in the Supreme Court later this year. So like I am a practicing lawyer, but I take my time to do this because I think it's useful for you. So my request, in addition to subscribing to Democracy Docket, is to put something in the comments so that we get a sense of how better to serve this community and how to make this content as useful and as user-friendly as possible. So with that, I wish you all a good Sunday evening and beginning of the week, and I hope you pay attention to everything happening to democracy in court, because if you're not paying attention to the courts, you're simply not paying attention to democracy. Thanks. I'll see you next time.